Try one more time. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 25, verse 31. And as we mentioned the other day, there's a lot of symbolism that's attributed by the different commentators, different aspects of the Mishkan. So what we're going to begin discussing today is the menorah. I would just like to highlight two aspects of the halachos of the menorah as described in the Torah to hopefully give us a little bit of a better understanding of the commentary that we'll see. So one is, it's a fascinating thing about the menorah. It was made a miksha achas. There was a block of gold that was, sort of formed into a menorah, which you can imagine would be a very difficult thing to kind of pull off. In other words, it wasn't separate pieces that were melded together or something. It was one big block of gold that got ultimately formed into a menorah. The other thing is, just for clarification, so no one's confused, the number of candles in the menorah in the Mishkan and Beis Hamikdash were 7, not 8. Truth be told, the menorah in the Mishkan preceded the Hanukkah story. So the Hanukkah story is connected to the menorah in the Mishkan. So we light 8 candles because the candles burned for 8 days. But the menorah, as described in the Torah and the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash, had 7 candles. And there's one central candle and then 3 candles on each side. And the way it's described in the Torah is that the 3 candles are kind of facing in towards the center candle. With that in mind, let's see the Sforno on Pasuk Lamed Aleph. You should make the menorah from pure gold. So the Sforno says this is the third vessel that we're describing here. The first one was the Aron, which represents the connection of the Jewish people to Torah. The second one, the ark. The second one was the Shulchan, the table, which, if you remember, we were discussing earlier in the week, and that represents the connection of the Jewish people to rulership, kingship, financial success. See there in your menorah. Now we talk about the menorah. Kula miksha achas. It was all made from one block of gold. V'or neiroseha echad. And the light of its candles was as one. Ba'amro v'heir al ever paneha. It says the candles should light towards its face. What does that mean? V'zeh. Shia or neros hayamin v'neros hasmol mechuvan Elohim soy. That the candles on the right side of the menorah and the candles on the left side of the menorah were both pointed in towards the middle. V'chein roi shia inyan ha'or hasichli b'chelek ha'iyuni v'gam kein oro b'chelek hamasi shiponim el ha'or ha'elyon la'avdo shchem echad. It's a very nice perspective this photo has. Says the idea of candles on both sides represents the fact that we as human beings are very much a composite of different inclinations and abilities. And we have an ability to think and reflect, sort of an abstract type of ability, and we have a concrete type of ability to do. So he says the candles on one side represent the power of the intellect and an emotion, etc. The candles on the other side represent the power of action. And the point is that both of these things are pointing in towards one central light, and it's all from one block, meaning there should be a unity in it all. So you'll meet people who do all the mitzvos, but if you talk to them about belief, they're like, I don't know. This is what we traditionally do. Or they do all the mitzvahs, but when you talk to them, they don't seem to be the elevated type person that you would think they should be. And then you meet people that you meet people that in their thoughts, they think so beautifully, they have such sincere intentions and such really sacred emotions, but it doesn't translate to action. And again, and none of us are perfect, and we're certainly not in the business of pointing out other people's flaws. We should certainly look at ourselves, but we can all appreciate the value of this image of a person that their abstract abilities and inclinations and their concrete abilities and inclinations are all from the same base, the same root, and they're all pointed inwards towards one flame. Ki az ya'iru kulam k'mo sheyoed b'menorah ba'amro ba'aloscha hariros el mur pneim l'ro ya'iru shivas haneros. That's the very famous pasuk in Ba'aloscha, that towards the menorah the candles should burn, meaning towards the center. V'zeh ma'aseh menorah miksha. That's what it means, that the menorah comes from one block of gold. Ki bios kol or mechuvan le'echad v'inyan hamiksha hamora achdos az nira or ki yoel min hamor hagadol. So he says, if all of the sources of light are from the same base, are coming from the same place, then the light is truly a great light. But if some of the light is coming from one place and another light's coming from a very different place, then it's just a mishmash. An interesting mashal from the Sforno. Let's go now to chapter 26, verse 15. Chapter 26, verse 15. We're now on to the boards of the Mishkan. Remember, the Mishkan had to be a mobile entity. So I know I'm going to sound like a contractor, but if you have a solid wall, you're going to have a hard time carrying it from place to place in the desert. So the way to do it is to have these boards, and numerous boards. Essentially, think of a sukkah. Think of like one of these, sukkahs with the panels. So they would have these boards going all around, and these boards were fine material, and they would constitute the walls. I want to just revisit something we spoke about at the very beginning of the week. The boards were held up by sockets that were positioned on the ground. So the boards would just kind of think of Lego for a second. The boards would kind of be stuck into the sockets positioned on the ground, and that's how they would all go around. The sockets came from the half shekel donations that every male over the age of 20 was obligated to give. So it's a beautiful thing to think about, that literally the Mishkan was held up by the composite of Klal Yisrael. There wasn't a sponsor for the sockets. Everybody was. So the thing that held up the Mishkan was from everybody. It's a nice thing to think about. But in any event, talking about those boards in verse 15, V'yosises hakrashim la Mishkan, and you should make boards for the Mishkan. Atzei shitim omdim. I believe Atzei shitim is normally translated as cedar wood. Cedar wood, standing. Now, what does standing mean here? What's like the pshat and the pasuk. So if you look at the second Rashi on this pasuk on Tesvav, Atzei shitim omdim, sheyehei orech hakrashim zakuf l'mala b'kiros hamishkan. That the length of the boards should be pointed upwards. In other words, the acacia wood. Thank you very much, Debbie. Sorry. The length of the boards, it shouldn't be, when we talk about the dimensions of the boards, it shouldn't be that the length of the boards is width-wise. It should be the length of the boards, they are height-wise. Okay. So that's what it means, omdim, that this is being conveyed by the pasuk by saying omdim. There's an interesting Kli Yakar over here. Kli Yakar on pasuk Tesvav. Sorry, and Kli Yakar on pasuk Tesvav, but skip about halfway through the Kli Yakar, beginning with the words ach kfi apshat. In my layout, it's a new paragraph. Ach kfi apshat, sheyakov heikinosam lavodas beis Elokeinu. We have a famous idea that Yaakov Avinu, when the Jewish people went down to Egypt, there's a famous medrash like this, that Yaakov Avinu took trees, or took the seeds, for trees from Israel, the Atzei Shittim, and brought them to Egypt. There's such an idea, because he understood that there would be a need for this wood down the road when they would leave Egypt. He knew that through divine inspiration. So if you understand it that way, Nucha Lomar Shelakach Amar Omdim. It could be that's why it says the wood was standing. Lomar Shegikhu Me'osan Atzei Shittim Ha'omdim Muchanim Lakach. Omdim literally means standing, and that fits for Rashi's pshat, but omdim could also mean ready, like ready and waiting, sort of. So take the wood of shittim that's been waiting all this time, Kizel mashmos lashon omdim b'harbe makomos davar amuchan va'omed lekach. Says that sometimes is the meaning. Fine. So that's just an interesting thing to think about. Now we're going to go on to chapter 27, verse 1. Chapter 27, verse 1. V'yosisa es hamizbeach atzei shitim. We're talking now about the outer altar. Make an altar again of acacia wood. And now we get into the dimensions of the altar. Very interesting. The altar, of course, was various offerings would be brought on the altar. And frequently, not always, but frequently, the reason why individuals would bring offerings was if they had sinned in one way or another. Different types of offerings for different types of sins. Kli Yakar on Pasuk Aleph. V'yosisas hamizbeach atzei shitim. B'tanchuma masik heim asu shtus v'chisuni be'egel yavo'u atzei shitim v'yachbral shtusan. There's a very interesting play on words, which I don't know if this is intended as the real explanation or more a deeper lesson, which we'll get into soon. Shitim is the type of wood, but there's a word that has a certain relationship, at least to shitim, which is shtus. Shtus is foolishness. Shtuyot in modern Hebrew is a popular word when people are doing ridiculous things. So they did something, they being Jewish people, did something ridiculous and angered God by committing the sin of the golden calf. Let the wood of shittim come and atone for their shtus, for their foolishness. V'zeh ki kochote nichnas bo ruach shtus. The idea, says the Kli Yakar, is that every time a person sins, there was a spirit of foolishness that entered into the person. Ki mitam zeh shlomo mechanes or shoim b'ksilim. Those of us who are doing Mishlei together, we see frequently Shlomo Melech refers to sinners as fools. That's the pshat. What do you mean? I mean, there can be people who are very smart, who do very sinful things. Read the newspaper. You'll see things like that every day. People very successful do all kinds of sinful things. But the pshat is that no matter how smart the person is, person who's done something wrong, there's a moment of foolishness that somehow gets into them. It's a fascinating comment when you think about it. First of all, I think if you reflect on it, you'll agree it's a very real to life observation. Sometimes you see people you have remarkably successful people throw their careers away with unbelievably stupid errors. And many times some temptation, it's not, what is it? It's not stupidity, it's like, what got into this person? We see that a lot. But I think there's something else that's relevant for all of us. When we do something wrong, and we all do something wrong, in a sense, it's not really us. I don't mean we're not responsible for it. We're absolutely responsible for it. But we're not bad people. We're all good people. We're good people that sometimes make foolish mistakes. And the truth is, if we view our own actions that way, I think we have more strength to turn it around. And if we view other people's actions that way, we're in, I think, better position to interact positively with others. We discussed this morning the Sforno on the imagery of the menorah. We discussed Rashi and Kli Yakar on the idea of the Atzei Shitim Omdim. And we began discussing the Kli Yakar on the relevance, on the deeper meaning of the altar being made from Atzei Shitim.